So Daredevil Season 3 is almost upon us, 2 years after his previous season and a year since we last saw Daredevil cropping up in the Defenders miniseries. The Marvel Netflix series, whilst beginning with huge critical acclaim, has seen a big dip in audience interest and on the whole, diminishing critical praise. This is very evident with Iron Fist's cancellation last week after 2 seasons, a rare move by Netflix to cancel a TV show, especially a Marvel show. In all honesty, my interest within the Marvel Netflix shows has near enough gone. The last series I watched to its completion was The Defenders, of which I was totally underwhelmed with. I didn't even attempt Jessica Jones Season 2, despite loving the first season. Luke Cage Season 2, while solid, didn't entice me and I gave up halfway through. Iron Fist Season 2, nope, zero interest after the train wreck that was Season 1. And The Punisher, I watched the first episode and actually enjoyed it, but still, I didn't feel the need to see any more. So what has happened to Marvel Netflix? So firstly, let's look at Marvel Netflix early days. Early development began in 2013 for a Daredevil TV show set in the MCU. This was pretty massive for the MCU. Whilst already a successful franchise, this movie showed audiences that the MCU will be expanding and showed critics the universe was here to stay and dominate if they could pull this off. It was then announced that this would see Daredevil look into the darker side of the MCU, dealing with more real world issues and have a more grounded feel to the show compared to the MCU films. It was also announced that Iron Fist, Luke Cage and Jessica Jones would be getting TV shows of their own with a team-up series at the end of it. So it was basically the R-rated Avengers. Something new, something different to your usual light-hearted MCU films. Fans were definitely excited for these shows, especially because the MCU was expanding, but that Marvel was willing to take risks and tell varied stories, if only on TV. So Daredevil arrived in 2015 and, well, it was fantastic. It was a truly refreshing entry into the MCU. Daredevil Season 1 had a truly gripping story which hooked you in from start to finish. Matt Murdock is developed excellently and Charlie Cox portrayed the character perfectly. Not to mention the show has maybe the greatest MCU villain, films included, with Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk. Daredevil Season 1 has a 99% Rotten Tomatoes score, better than any MCU film and the highest rated Netflix Marvel show. It's fair to say the show was a massive hit. Fans loved the new direction the MCU had gone. Whilst you could still see light-hearted MCU films, if you wanted to watch something more grounded in reality, in similar vein to The Dark Knight, then those stories were available with the MCU now, with Daredevil. However, a lot of critics had one aspect of the show they felt needed slight improvement, and that was pacing. This wasn't a huge issue, and Season 1 of Daredevil probably has the best pacing of all the Marvel Netflix shows, but it is something that I will touch on further in this video. After this, Marvel Netflix released Jessica Jones Season 1, which again was a big hit, dealing with very heavy issues such as rape, assault and PTSD, with great performances by Jessica Ritter and David Tennant. Again though, pacing was a concern for the series, but the series benefited from strong performances and some truly fantastic episodes. So now we come on to where the problems began for Marvel Netflix. After Daredevil Season 2, which on the whole was enjoyable, despite what I felt was a rushed ending, Luke Cage and Iron Fist were released, and to say these shows dragged from slow pacing was an understatement. Luke Cage Season 1 is probably the show most evident of this pacing problem. Whilst the first 7 episodes were highly enjoyable, with yet again a great villain with Cottonmouth, the next 6 episodes felt like an absolute drag, introducing an entirely new antagonist and having episodes which in no way progressed the plot. I have ploughed through and completed the season, but I began to notice that these Marvel Netflix shows felt all basically like the same show, all set in one location with a dark gritty tone, dealing with just street crime. Iron Fist came around and yeah, I gave up after 4 episodes. It was shocking and that's all I have to say about it. From this point, The Defenders was released. The team-up series we'd been waiting for, and although I enjoyed having just 8 episodes and the quicker storytelling, the show was a disappointment, and that's all I have to say on Defenders. I think this is where Marvel Netflix had lost me. It felt to me they'd run out of ideas, unsure of what to do with the villains and unwilling to have these characters leave New York, which to me seems bizarre. So can Daredevil save the Marvel Netflix universe? Well, yes and no. Firstly, I will be watching Daredevil Season 3. I loved the previous 2 seasons and I enjoy the character. With the return of Wilson Fisk, this also has me pumped for the new season. This also seems to resonate with other fans who also appear to be on the whole returning to Marvel Netflix with Daredevil Season 3. This I think is large thanks to the wonderful job done with the first 2 seasons, and this is where Marvel Netflix began and truly encapsulated audiences with its storytelling. But what do I think Daredevil and Marvel Netflix needs to do on the whole in order to continue, or at least continue on the Disney streaming service, which is out next year?
Let's do this again sometime.
Firstly, pacing. The pacing issue really needs to be addressed now. I'm unsure why Marvel continues with these 13 episode runs. They are evidently far too long for these TV shows. Budget is clearly running low around episodes 7 to 11, as you will find most of these shows' storylines literally stop dead, with very little actually happening to move the story forward. Once past this point, the final 2 episodes will usually see our characters venture out and maybe have a few fight scenes. I find myself usually watching these episodes and asking myself, what has the character actually done that episode, and realising they are no closer to the conclusion than they were at the beginning of the episode. This doesn't make me want to watch further episodes and has the opposite effect. I begin to switch off and become uninterested. But that's just me and my poor attention span. Daredevil Season 3 is again 13 episodes, and Marvel aren't listening to the critics, but 13 episodes can work. It has before with the first 3 seasons of Marvel Netflix. As long as the stories are concise and have our characters either moving forward with the story or learning about themselves and the characters around them, which will in effect their characterization, this on the whole will have an effect on the story. Episodes where the plot slows down are not bad at all, as long as they are done correctly. For example, episode 3 of Daredevil Season 2, New York's Finest, is probably the best episode of any of the Marvel Netflix series, and is based mostly on a rooftop and just features 2 characters, the Punisher and Daredevil. This is an excellently written episode where we learn a lot about our characters. We're learning why the Punisher does what he does. We finally have time for some breathing space, and it is explained what makes him tick, what his beliefs are, and how they conflict with Daredevil's beliefs. It is a great episode, and it affects our characters' actions going forward in the series. Compare that to Luke Cage Season 1 Episode 11, Now You Are Mine, which largely takes place in Harlem Paradise. We don't really learn about our characters. Yes, they talk and reveal secrets about themselves, but it comes off as exposition and is placed in entirely the wrong place of the season. With only 2 episodes after this one, it is odd to have a slower episode, which to add some character development when things should be ramping up to the big finale. The episode just feels out of place and is executed poorly. This is the problem with the pacing problem in the Marvel Netflix series. The slower episodes are placed at the end to fill out time instead of at the beginning to allow the audience to learn about our characters.
Talk about Santa Claus.
I live in the real world, too, and I've seen it.
What have you seen?
Redemption, Frank. It's real. And it's possible. The people you murdered deserve another chance.
Another aspect I want to touch on is the characters never leaving New York. This to me is very strange. Now, whilst I know the characters are probably New York based characters, they are allowed to venture out the city sometimes. I mean, you could have a season of Iron Fist based in Kunlun, but hey, that's already too late because it's been cancelled. Having these characters just be based in New York has become stale. Whilst the gritty feel and street crime aspect was refreshing to begin with, it's just plain boring. Set pieces look the same and it's just not visually interesting anymore. These characters are not entirely defined by a location. Having them grow and go on new adventures is refreshing and interesting, similar how to Marvel Netflix began as refreshing and interesting. There is a plethora of stories that could be told outside of New York. The MCU doesn't just base its superheroes all within one location, and is doing a very good job recently of making things interesting by placing our characters in various locations and telling new stories, expanding the universe. And this is where the Marvel Netflix shows can take advice from. Whilst I do understand budget concerns probably affect the Netflix shows far greater than the films, adding different locations I imagine could be done, especially if the episode numbers were decreased. This could give a higher budget per episode and could allow for more on-set filming. Whilst Daredevil Season 3 is all based in New York, it appears, he is defined more by New York compared to his Defender counterpart, so it's not a big issue for me, but I would like to see this Marvel Netflix expanded. However, there is no reason why these characters shouldn't be looking to fight crime outside of New York. Daredevil Season 3 needs to be, in a word, refreshing. Marvel Netflix has become bogged down in the same story tropes, and while still very well acted by all the leads, villains are becoming stale and boring. The new season of Daredevil needs to show what Marvel Netflix is good at, and that is telling gripping stories set in a grounded world, trying to keep fast-paced episodes which are always progressing the plot, and focusing on the dynamic between Fisk and Matt Murdock. This element is probably the greatest in the Daredevil series. If this is done correctly, I can't see why renewed interest within the Marvel Netflix series cannot be achieved. But those are my thoughts on the Marvel Netflix shows, and if Daredevil can save the Netflix TV series. Audiences definitely appear to be more excited about the upcoming season of Daredevil, and I for one will definitely be returning to this franchise and watching Daredevil. Obviously they will not be taking Daredevil out of New York City in this season at all, but I hope the issues with pacing and storytelling are addressed, and to have a concise story arc not be spread out and feel like it's dragging is a difficult ask, but I think Daredevil is the show to do it. I truly hope the Marvel Netflix shows return to form with Daredevil Season 3, and I look forward to sitting down and binge watching this like I used to with these TV shows. Thank you for watching.